the story of the birth of Moses and the particular behavior of his mother for our text for today. And I find it a fascinating story about motherhood. Anybody that reads this story that's a mother should be thankful that they did not have to make the choices she made. Amen. Because they were very difficult choices, but yet she made them both. As I read through the story several times this week, there were three things that jumped out at me in regards to the story that this mother displayed. And when I think about it, I think it's something that every mother in here, in some way, has displayed. So mothers, as I bring this message this morning, you check off in your block whether or not you display these characteristics of a mother. And there are many, but I'm just picking out three that I thought speaks to us today, and that for all of you young ladies in here who are yet to be mothers. Amen. Amen. Listen closely, because you're going to need these ingredients if you choose to be a mother. And as you assess your own mother, if you're young teenagers, you better believe that they got a lot of these characteristics. And they are on display every day that they have to deal with you. Amen. I'm not thinking of my young folk, I just know how young folk are. I had a couple of them. Amen. The church, I want to talk about Jochebed. That was Moses' mother. Amen? So if you're wondering, if you hear that name, you say, who's he talking about? That's Moses' mother, okay? But think about it. You are in a situation and you're pregnant and your Pharaoh announces that all the male children must die. And you're not fortunate enough to have the technology that we have today to know whether or not you're carrying a male or female child. And you give birth and it's a boy. And you know what Pharaoh's edict has said, that all the male children must die. And you got 3 months of walking the floor, 3 months of nursing, 3 months of looking into the eyes of this handsome child and feeling its breath on your breath and looking deep within the innocence of his eyes. And you know you got to make a decision about what you're going to do, because you know if your child is found, he will die. What would be your position? Would you take his own life to keep someone else from taking it? Will you run the risk of trying to hide the child the whole time in its young life? Or would you do as his mother did? Take him down to the river and put him in a basket and see what happens. Church, the first characteristic I want to talk about that this mother Jochebed had was Jochebed had a faith that God was in control of the future. Amen. For every woman that births a child, they must have a faith to believe that even though your circumstances may not be the best circumstances, is in control of the future. Jochebed came to the conclusion that God was in control, not Pharaoh, but God. Every mother in here has to know that God is in charge of everything. Not where you work, not your support system, but God. Why, Pastor? Why are you saying that? Because let me tell you something. When you go to work and your child goes to school, you don't know what your child is doing. You don't know where your child is. And you don't know who your child is running with. All you know is that they got on the bus or got out of the car and walked into the schoolhouse, and that was it. But when you believe and you have faith that God is in control, you don't really worry about a lot of things. Because you know God is watching over your child. Yes. So Jochebed came to the conclusion that because God was in control of the future, that she would take her child down to the Nile and set it on the river and see what happened. A faith in God allows you to release your child. Now, I understand that a lot of us try to control our children. Amen. You can say amen this morning, church. It's all right. You try to control, but let me tell you something. What they do in front of you does not guarantee that's what they do away from you. Now, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't try to paint and create an atmosphere where they have the fear of God in regards to you. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you got to understand that at the end of the day, you got to trust God for the outcome of your child. A lot of us believe that we got our children where they are, but I'm here to tell you, when your grown-up children sit and tell the stories of what they got into when you weren't around, you realize right quick and in a hurry that God had his hand in the midst, and that God was watching over and keeping them in the midst of it all. Therefore, church, this Jochebed had a faith that believed that God controlled the future, and that Moses was going to be all right in spite of her seeing him on the river. How many mothers in here today know that your son and your daughter got to where they are because of the grace of God? Oh, yeah. It wasn't so much your upbringing, but it was God's hand watching over and keeping them in the midst of it all. It took Jochebed 3 months to come to the conclusion of releasing Moses onto the Nile, but she had to wrestle with that thing and talk to God, and finally she said, God, I trust you. How many parents, how many mothers in here right now realize that you got to have a faith in God if you're going to raise children in this 21st century? With all of its distraction and all of its destructive behavior around us, we've got to have a faith that says, God, you got to be my anchor and hold me in the midst of it all, that I might believe that you are in charge of the future. Yes. Jochebed also had to have hope. She had to have a hope that Moses would be saved from Pharaoh's sword. That God would save and sustain Moses. Now look at how this thing plays itself out, church. When she had a faith that God was in control of the future, and that God would save and sustain Moses, that was her hope. And now watch what happened when they are watching from a distance. Look at how God shows up in the midst of this whole moment of tears and releasing and letting go. Look how God works immediately in her life. The child is immediately discovered. Immediately. The child is discovered. And now you see, church, you got to be looking for evidence that God is at work in your child. Because I'm telling you, children do some strange stuff. Amen. They will make you believe that you haven't done anything right. Amen. Am I the only parent in here? Children will make you question who you are. Is that my child? Amen. But at the same time, you got to be looking, because if you believe that God is in control of the future, you got to be looking for evidence that God is somehow or another at work in the life of this child, or at work in the environment around your child. Because see, sometimes when your child brings a friend home, you will see evidence that God has placed your child with a godly friend. And you see, this hope was immediately reinforced, because the very threat to his life, daughter takes him. She never thought. But she believed that God was at work. See, parents, you got to believe that God is at work in your life and in your children's life, and that God cares about your children. You got to understand that as a mother, that God has birthed that child for a purpose. See, that child just didn't come here to make you smile. Amen. That child just didn't come here to give you a name. Amen. Even though I saw over the last couple of days that all of these young men being drafted in the NFL, and all of these mothers with tears streaming down their face, and all of these mothers saying, "My boy finally made it." They were proud mothers, they were happy mothers. But I got to tell you something, God had a hand in it. Yeah, as much as gifted and as talented as these athletes are, you got to understand, they didn't get this stuff because their mama's genes and their daddy's genes made them look this way. No, God has a purpose for these young men's lives. But you got to see, as a mother, you got to have hope. That God will save and sustain your child. You got to have a hope. I don't care what your child is getting into or getting out of. You as a parent, as a mother, as a father, you got to have a hope to say that I know that God is able to do what I can't do. Because I'm going to tell you something. If you had a child like Mikey, amen, I'll leave that alone. But see, my mom had 8 boys that she had to be worried about 24/7. But the thing of it is that God had his hand on all 8 of us. We really never got in any trouble. Why? Because God had his protective hand around us, and every time we tried to stray, God would snatch a knot in our butts. How did he do that? How did you do that, Mikey? Robert Glenn. Amen. God made sure that my daddy was involved in our lives. And therefore, the hope that my mom had that we would grow up and be responsible men was reinforced because God sustained us. You see, let me tell you something, mothers. Even though your child may be giving you some lip, children do talk that. Amen. I understand that. There's something in them that they can't be quiet. But you don't understand. That's the first thing come out of their mouth. But you don't understand. You see, it's like this. It be like this. And you sitting there looking at them like, no, it don't be like that.
it's going to be like this. But Mama, let me explain. You don't have to explain that. But Mama, you don't. No, but Mama me. Every mother goes through that. But let me tell you something, church. In order for us to be as Jochebed was, we got to have a love that's submissive. What are you getting at, Pastor? You see, this Jochebed had a love that was submissive to the will of God. Once in her mind, once it was settled that she had to set him on the Nile, she loved her child enough to release him into the care of God. What are you getting at, Pastor? What I'm trying to tell mothers this morning is that you've got to love your child enough that you can have a submissive will to God's will. What are you saying, Pastor? What I'm saying is there comes a point in your life, in every mother's and every father's life, where you just have to release your child to God. Yes. See, that's a submissive will. See, some parents try to keep their children right up under 24/7. Amen. Some of you have even tried it, but what do you get? You get a rebellious child. And that's why you need a submissive love to the will of God. God says, train up a child. That's what he says in his word. Train up a child in the way that you would have them to go. And once you have trained them up, once you have taught them, once you've been an example, you've got to have a submissive love that let God's will take over. You got to send them off the street. You got to let them go out the front door. You got to let them get behind the wheel of a car. You got to let them go with their friends. You got to let them grow up. Because God got to work on them. God got to take them through some stuff. God got to bring them out of some stuff. You know, as a mother, you know what God brought you through. You know what God brought you out of. You know what God brought you from. You know, as a mother, you say, well, I'm just trying to protect them so that they don't have to go through what I go through. But your mama tried to protect you to keep you from going through what you went through. And every now and then you got to say, God, not my will, but let your will be done. So you got to have a submissive love to where you can release that child to God. When you have trained them up. See, I didn't relieve you of your responsibility. I just said you got to do your part. But once you've done your part, then you got to have a submissive love. See, Jochebed only had 3 months before she had to make that decision. Some of you got 18 years. That come out a lot stronger than I thought it would. But it's the truth. Amen. You still trying to raise an adult. Amen, church. Jochebed says, Lord, I know that you hold the future. I know that my hope that you will sustain and save my child. But I know most of all, God, that I got to love him enough to let him go. In hopes, Father, that your will be done in his life. Mom, let me tell you something. Love your children with all your heart. Give them everything you can give them. But most of all, give them to God. And let God have his way with them. And I'll tell you, you'll sleep a little better at night when you know that, Lord, they're in your hands now. God, you're the watchful eye that's got to keep an eye on them at 24/7. Lord, you're the one that's got to order their steps. Lord, I know I've taught them right. I've taught them well. But let me tell you something. The best taught, the most well-trained will still go astray. But there is a God that see when they're in harm's way, that will send somebody by to protect them, to nurture them, to keep them, and order their steps. Yeah, Moses got in some trouble as an adult. Y'all know the story, right? Yeah, I'm sure Mama's heart was broken when he had to kill a fellow person. But you see, God kept his hands on him. In church, what I'm trying to say this morning is, mothers, God's going to take care of your child. You did what you were supposed to do. You brought them into the world. You trained them up. But God is the one that will make a man or a woman. Amen. 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 Keep the faith.